to the cloud. So anyway, welcome everyone, and thank you, Julie Conroy, for joining us. There are 29 of us who are very interested, 28 of us, interested in finding out what your district does, Julie, with the students that come from Mexico. One of the things that I've learned in my career is that we always give the margin of doubt to the families and to the kids, and we try to support them in any way we can. That does not mean that we bend the rules, but I remember working with a mentor when I lived in New York, and she said that she would do just about anything to help the migrant kids. And she was known to have done just about anything and everything to help migrant kids move forward and be successful. So it was my mentor, Dr. Gloria Matera. I don't know if any of you remember that far back. Jonathan does. So yeah, an
They named
awesome
the
lady.
center after her, right?
Yes, right. So anyway, we are going to, you will have your agenda. I was sent it out yesterday, and Julie Conroy is volunteering her time. She is a counselor at Gresham High School. And thank you, Julie, for sharing your knowledge with us. And we are all taking furious notes.
Well, I'll share my presentation. It's so nice to connect with you all. I see lots of familiar faces. Josue, shout out to Region 26. If some of you probably know me, but I worked in the migrant program in Region 26 for like, I don't know, 13, 14 years. So it's strange not working with the migrant program, but it's been really great this school year reconnecting with, hi Annabelle. It's great reconnecting with you all. And obviously the migrant program is always in my heart. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share a little bit about how I work with students, particularly newcomers from other countries, to help them adjust to school and to recognize and honor the education that they're coming with from their home countries. And one tangible way that we can do that is through recognizing and honoring the credits that they've earned in high school. So it has become a big part of my job because we've had a lot of newcomer students in our region, and I assume that that's happening across the state. So I will, let's see, Jenna, it looks like I'm not able to share my screen.
You should be now.
Let's see if I can try again.
Julie, you're co-host, so you should be able to do that.
Yeah, it just popped up. So
Okay, great.
Here we go. Okay, I think this is gonna work. All right, can you all see this? Yeah, okay, awesome, thank you. All right, so Jeanette asked me to speak just about how I, as a high school counselor, can do kind of what I just talked about, can recognize and honor what students have done in their home countries. And so I'm just going to share from my personal experience. This is my 4th year as a school counselor at Gresham High School. And I have mostly just kind of followed the practice that was here in place before I started. So I picked up where the previous counselor had left off. So I think that there is some, there's some kind of benefit of knowing that there was something in place before I came, but I've also am slightly siloed in the fact that all newcomers in our district come through our school. And so I am the one person in the district who reviews transcripts and awards credit. So I do work with a team at the district office, and we do have a district policy. So one thing that I'll say, I'll kind of go briefly through what I do, and then I really want to just talk about how the migrant program can support students in this area. But kind of the steps that I take when students come new from another country is that I interview the student and the family just in a really informal way to find out what their educational background is. And then if it sounds like they do have grades and credits that can transfer from their home country, I request to see an original. And then if they are struggling to get an original copy of their transcript, it's important for me to document our efforts to obtain an original. And that's because in our district policy that I follow, if a family is unable to get an official original copy of their transcript that I can see and our registrar can stamp, then we can use our documentation to tell the district, hey, we tried all of these things and the family was unable to get an official copy, but they don't have an original, but they have a copy. So sometimes we're able to use a copy, even if it isn't the original. And that's a really important distinction because an original is original, right? And a copy, what we're often seeing now is photos on phones. So I get all of those copies, but then I wait and I work with the family and try to document their efforts to obtain an original. Let's see. All right, so there's a couple of tools that I use. One is the A to Z manual. Can you all see this? Okay. So this is a tool that I use to compare transcripts. So if I pull up Honduras, for example, this tool allows me to get a sense of what the school year looks like in Honduras. It helps me recognize if the amount of hours that students are in classes there is similar to ours, what their school year looks like. And then it shows me the Honduras and US equivalent in grade levels, and then the grading system used. So this tool is one that I pull up often because I can just search by country and it has lots of countries. So that's one of the tools that I use for transcription. This is actually a migrant, as you can see, New York tool that I think I just kind of came across, but it really lays out a lot of the countries that students are coming from currently and where the high school credits, how they align to kind of know, once you interview the family and find out what grade level they made it through in their home country, this allows us to recognize if we can honor their credits at the 9th grade level. So as you can see in Mexico's column, tercero de secundaria is the equivalent of our 9th grade. So when I'm interviewing families who have come from Mexico, I start out by finding out if they completed tercero de secundaria and if they went to prepa, and then I work with them from there to request documentation. So I'm going to show you a couple of tools that I use in my transcription, and I'll go through this kind of quickly just because I'm not sure. This is obviously a counseling task, but I do want you to know that I basically type in based on the transcripts that I see onto this format that is similar to kind of a transcript, what grades what the name of the school, the classes that they took and the grades, and then I total their credits here. So here's an example of a student who, was an official, a copy of an official from 10th and 11th, so from prepa. And so I scored her based on her calificaciones here, utilizing the chart that I showed you here. Let's see, there's Mexico on the 10-point scale. Mexico's one of the easier ones. But basically, I will list out all of the classes that she took and the marks and the number of credits. And then I submit this to our registrar who updates the credits on the student's local transcript. So that's kind of how the process is done at the counseling level. Here's an official 9th grade, and that student's transcript is here. So this is the tercero de secundaria. So I know that this is an official that I saw. Obviously, it looks like a copy because we took a copy of it, but this one is broken out in trimesters, as you can see here. So this is, even though there's a promedio final, I've broken it out on the transcript here by trimester 1, trimester 2, and trimester 3. And just so that you know, the local language class is considered language arts credit. So students earn language arts credit for Spanish. And then if they took a foreign language or English, it would show up as a fine arts credit in the US system. So that was really brief, but I just kind of wanted you to get a sense of like what it looks like and how I'm utilizing the tool and the transcript to document the credits that students are earning. So really the bulk of what I wanted to talk with you about is just the role of the MEP. And I know that whether you're a graduation specialist or a recruiter or a family engagement specialist, that you are connecting with the families in lots of different ways. I think the most important takeaways from your role are to obviously advocate to honor the educational experience that students bring with them. And you can be a really integral part in helping collect information to support students. And that goes back to that piece where I'm, finding out about their educational background and then working on getting that official documentation. So can you, as a person who's maybe meeting the family before me, or can counselors and graduation specialists work together to make a plan on how the family is going to get that official documentation, help document the effort of the family, and then follow up. So I keep a spreadsheet, and I've got maybe 10 students right now who I need to check in with almost on a monthly basis to find out how's the process going, what have you tried. Lots of schools in Mexico are still closed, so we're kind of waiting for schools to open. And so, sometimes families are in kind of a holding pattern. And as a 9th grader or a 10th grader, it isn't as critical, right, to get their transcript updated right away. But as a junior or a senior, it's really important for them to be able to see that they are earning credit for the courses that they took in their home countries. And so Jeanette and I just talked about, how maybe MEP staff can help support students and families in these efforts to help them know that we can honor and recognize the work that they've done in their home countries. I've had some personal experiences with just personal connections where I've talked with moms who have students in high school, and they've, just in conversation, I have asked about their schooling, and they said, oh yeah, my daughter finished their cero de secundaria, and then we moved up to the States. And I'll say, oh, did you get credit from high school? And they'll say, no, nobody at the school ever asked me for that. So I don't think that every counselor across the state is necessarily going to have the knowledge to ask what level someone went through and to recognize kind of how the systems work and can work together. And I think we really need to work together to make sure that, that student I helped connect to their counselor, and I let the counselor know, please ask them for their transcript. But if that conversation hadn't happened, that student would have attended high school an entire year more than she needed to. And so that's doing her a disservice. So I just feel really strongly in making sure that folks know what kind of the steps are that you can do to support students in these types of situations. So that's all I have. I'm sorry, I probably spoke kind of quickly, but I'm happy to be a resource in the future if you ever have a question about a family's situation. I have transcribed transcripts from Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Afghanistan, Egypt. There's the tools are really helpful to be able to, to give kids the credit that they've deserved. So I'm happy to be a resource if you have questions in the future, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions anyone might have right now.
Julie, I do have a question. Is if I am not a licensed counselor and I am in a role of the graduation specialist, how do I approach the counselor who is the one who awards the credit? I mean, that personal, I don't want to step on the counselor's role in any way, shape, or form, but I do want to be an advocate for the students and the families that I'm with. Can you speak a little bit about that relation? I don't want to step on her or his toes of the responsibilities, but can you talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you all are, also counselors are overworked and have really large caseloads. So I think connections to community partners are really key. And I think that counselors are hopefully more than willing to receive support and help from you as a community partner to support students. So, you know, whether you're working directly with the family and then going to the school together, or just ensuring that the family is getting information to the counselor, or if you're helping in another way more directly with the counselor, I think any way that you approach it, you know, if a licensed counselor gets access to a transcript, they should be able to take it from there. So I think whatever works best, you know, I know that different regions have different types of relationships with graduation specialists, whether you're in the building or outside of the building. So I would just say to try to connect with those people, or with the, you know, come to the building with the family, or connect with the school through the family, just to make sure that everything gets turned in to that counselor so that they can, take it from there. And if you are having issues, I mean, I'd be happy to try to help support, but, you know, because I have a lot of experience with families, and I'm kind of the one person that newcomers come to, I think it's easier in our district, but not every district might be set up that way. So it's hard for me to speak to how it works in other areas.
Because it is possible that every school district has their own codes for certain courses that may not be offered in other districts as well, right?
I think for the state of Oregon, I think it's pretty clear where classes would fall as far as how they're coded. We provide, you know, social studies credit for any history class. We provide science credit for, it's usually pretty clear on transcripts how to code courses.
So I have a question, Julie. So if we get a migrant student from Texas and they did like 2 months of Algebra 1 in Texas, and then they come to Oregon, do your school district grant the seat time that the student received in Texas?
Yes, we usually just, we use transfer grades to place students at the same grade in previous courses, and then they move forward from there. So like if a student had an 83% in their Algebra 2 class in Texas, we would put them in an Algebra 2 class here, and they would start the class with an 83%.
Okay, at times, would you know that this is a migrant student, or how would you go about in obtaining the information from Texas?
That typically comes just through the registrar. So the school in Texas should send the transfer grades and all other school information to the new school. And so at that time, at the time of enrollment in our school, we would have a copy of the students' transfer grades, and so would then place students accordingly.
So let's say the students don't know where they're going, and or where they're going to move to. How would you get that information? Let's say they left school in Texas, picked up and go, did not tell the teachers, or did not even officially withdraw from Texas, comes to your school. How do you go about in placing the student?
We would try to reach out to the school before enrolling the student. So they would show up at our school. We would walk them through the steps to enroll at our school. And then at the same time, would be reaching out to their previous school to request transfer grades.
So you would physically pick up the phone and reach out to the previous school.
Our registrar would, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Do any of you have any specific questions or any cases or anything that this is a great opportunity to consult with Julie if you have any transcripts that you want to share or
I
talk
think
about?
Robert had a question.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Julie.
Uh-huh.
I do have a question for you. So I guess where I work in Region 3, Columbia Gorge, I was kind of called to account why I was looking at student transcripts. And I feel like it was just a matter of just not understanding, my job description. And once I forwarded that to the principal, that was made clear. I still think that I get some resistance from the counseling office in my school on using that as a tool, but I use that as a main tool. I often find that migrant students, even though they've seen their transcript before, have no idea that it's their whole high school career in one document. And I use it as a tool to reflect, how they've been, what they've been doing, and where they're at now, to help motivate them on their path toward graduation. And I still get this sense. I had a counselor in my office last week that they feel a little bit territorial over that document, and maybe perhaps would like me to not do that, and they see that maybe as their role. However, what I'm discovering is that because 90% of the time what I hear is, no, I've either not seen that or I have no idea how to read that. And that really, when I take the time to explain that, I really feel like the student is motivated, has a solid understanding of where they're at and what to do next. The part that I kind of feel that they were territorial over was they really didn't want me to make any recommendations on which classes the student should take. They felt, and so I conceded, I'm not going to make recommendations on classes, but I'm certainly going to let the student know where they're at, and if they're missing certain credits, point that out and say, this is how many you have, this is how many you need to graduate. You need to either go to summer school, you need to talk with your counselor. But I guess just your advice on that particular scenario.
Yeah, Robert, I mean, I think that advocating for students to look at different course options is really appropriate for you as a graduate. I don't know if you're a graduation specialist, but I think that, I'm constantly trying to connect students to mentors and community partners who can spend the time with students that students need to be able to feel like they have some ownership over their high school experience and what courses they're going to take and how that might impact their future. So I'm sorry that you had that experience. I'm not sure that, that every licensed counselor would communicate with you maybe in the way that you experienced with this particular person, but I think that you are an advocate and should be able to to work within your role as an advocate with students and to encourage them. And I think that sometimes counselors think that they're the ones who are going to be checking students course selections eventually, and make sure that they're in the right classes. So I think that I don't know how to give advice in that situation except to say I would say keep doing what you're doing. I think it's what students need. They need to have an individual working with them and finding out what they're passionate about and making choices.
Thank you. That's comforting. I will keep doing what I'm doing, even though I feel like maybe it's maybe frowned upon a little bit, but I do see the results in using it to motivate them. So it just feels a little awkward sometimes, but I'm okay with it feeling awkward as long as the student is getting what they need.
I agree.
Well, and the bottom line is that our jobs as educators in the migrant education program is to advocate. That's the number one thing that we do is advocate. And Robert, you're doing the right thing by going back and asking questions and following up. Any specific other questions for Julie?
So I don't have a question, but I do want to speak a little to my experience working with the different school districts here in Region 26 and specifically with Gresham Barlow, where Julie's at. So as she mentioned, a lot of the times, the registrar is a person making first contact with the students or the families. And usually if they have a lead that the student might be migrant, they'll send, some sort of notification either to myself or to a recruiter, and I'll meet with them. When it comes to transcripts, either because they came directly from Mexico or another country, or if they stopped off, let's say in California for a couple classes before they came to Oregon. So I work with the counselors. A lot of them will notify me if they know that this is a student that's migrant, and we'll email, figure out as much as we can. A lot of the work that I do is with the student and with the parent, because a lot of the times the parents don't necessarily know why their student is asking for these things. So it's just taking the time to explain that to them, and in Spanish, or after regular school hours when a counselor isn't available to do that. And then further, sometimes when Julie spoke to honoring the educational experience, my role looks like setting up a meeting with an administrator, because a lot of the times it comes down to an administrator of, okay, whether they should get 0.25 credits or 0.5 credits for whatever class they took. So that's something else that I'm able to support counselors in. Then I can take the time specifically to sit down with an administrator and kind of explain the situation. Because if a student is credit deficient, not because they failed the course, but simply because they didn't have the opportunity to take it, it's a little difficult for us as a migrant education program to pay for credit accrual, because it's not technically credit recovery. And a lot of times the students can't even take a credit recovery class because, again, they didn't necessarily miss it. So that's all the weeds that I can explore, beyond what counselors have the ability to, or maybe the capacity to do.
Josue, it sounds like you have a really good network and you're at an ESD level. So a good network of communication with the school districts and the registrars and the counselor. Could you describe how you go about in setting that communication where they alert you or the recruiter in your region?
I talk a lot. So I go to all the schools and I talk to everybody, front desk, whoever it is. And everybody, we're all on the same side. Everybody means well, and sometimes things just get overlooked, or certain aspects aren't considered. So I'm just there to kind of do a little bit, more of a thorough job or consideration of these things.
And Josue's done a great job of connecting with folks at our district office too. So he comes up in conversations with people, not just through me in the counseling department at a high school, but through district folks that he has connections with. So he's done a really good job of pushing in really to the districts to showcase the support that the migrant program offers students. And it's I see that in my role because I know that he's working behind the scenes with families and with folks in the district to make sure that migrant students are being centered.
I think the support of the administrators and also your director is important to make the connection be successful, especially at the ESD level. So I think, Robert, how he feels that there's no trust and they don't know who you are, especially when you're working at an ESD, you're working with multiple districts and sometimes multiple counties. It's really hard to establish that working relationship.
Are there any other comments, feedback, concerns, questions?
I have one, but maybe I'll follow up with Julie later on. I am the person that does this in my district, so I'm curious if you have experience correlating. This is a specific transcript question. Pensamiento matemático 1 and 2, which is like mathematical thinking at a bachillerato level, so like a 10th grade. This is a Bachillerato General Estatal out of Puebla. And the student took Lenguaje y Comunicación 1, Pensamiento Matemático 1 semester, and then 2 on the second. And I'm having a hard time as I look at their curriculum and all their informational sheets, I'm having a hard time correlating that with algebra or algebra 2. Any experience with that one subject?
Not that I can think of with that particular class title. I do typically err on the side of just recognizing that a student's taken 2 semesters of a math level course, the bachillerato level. So I'm happy to speak offline with you about the specifics of that. But like I said, Annabelle, I just work really hard to try to make sure that we're honoring the amount of time and the level that students have engaged in different coursework. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'll send you an email.
Okay.
I have a question. So I was surprised to find out, Julie, that your school district gives LA credit for Spanish 3. And I think that's the second school district that I've heard that has done these. And so I've tried to work with our school counselors here and administrators to get to that point. So I was gonna ask you, because I think the last conversation that I had with one of our counselors here is that the state has it written on their website that it must be ELA. So I'm just wondering, how were you able to do that?
So that is one of the practices that was in place before I started here as a counselor. What I will say is that if you contact many of the local other local school districts, that's one of the ways that I've kind of ensured that I'm doing things appropriately is I'll connect with PPS. They have one person in their district that does this. Beaverton School District, so some of the larger districts I'll connect with and just collaborate, and you will find that that's what everyone is doing. So I don't know exactly how it's written on ODE's website, but I also know that ODE is looking at providing language arts credit. I keep admitting people, so I hope that's okay, Jeanette. I know that ODE is looking at widening their maybe definition of English language arts in the near future. That's at least what our district office folks are telling me, that even ELD courses, Jonathan's got his hand up, so he knows more about this than I do. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, I was just going to say that when I was at the department, we had multiple conversations for the last 5 years saying, if you took math and then you come and take math here, it's the same credit. If you take language arts and you're learning, all the things in language arts, just because it's in a different language, it should count here. And we would say the same about science. If you took biology in Mexico and you take biology here, it's in a different language, and so we were trying to take off English language arts and just call it language arts. And for the most part, when I talked to the language arts person at ODE, and we had a lot of discussions, she said, it makes total sense. Yeah, we should, if you took biology, we wouldn't say, no, that was in Spanish. And so why would you argue that, language arts would be different? And so she was recommending to people when they contacted her to say, yeah, like Julie said, count language arts, because that's what's gonna, if I come as a junior from Mexico and I've taken 3 years of language arts, I should get credit for those language arts classes that I took. I shouldn't have to go all the way back, learn English, and then, take 4 years of language arts. And so I don't work for the department anymore, but that was the advice 2 years ago when I left, that it should be accepted. And that argument that I just made, you could make to your school and say, don't we want these kids to graduate? Don't we want to give them credit for the classes that they've already done? Do we want to hold them back and make them a 5th and 6th year student just so that they take English language arts? And so there's no school that doesn't want to help their graduation, and they want to honor the classes that they've already taken just because you took it in a different country. So hang in there. I think you're on the right track.
Okay, and Julie, can I have our local counselor contact you? Would that be okay?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Jonathan's absolutely right. It's language arts. You're learning language arts. You're not whether it's in Farsi or English, you're still learning the concepts of developing language acquisition and skills.
Yeah, the district's argument is that it's good for students to stay at 50 years, so they learn.
Well, and
English.
that might be true, but that's beside the facts. That's not honoring what they've done. There may be a discussion to be had with the student and family about what they can benefit from at the high school if they remain, but there are ways to stay a 5th year if that's helpful, that don't involve not honoring their language arts credit from their home country.
Yeah, and that's something that as graduation specialists, we can really advocate for. We've had, some students that are unaccompanied minors that will stay in a school district either for English language learner classes or just so they have access to other services, as they transition.
Yeah, it's free English classes, right? At high school, as soon as they leave high school, they have to pay. So every student's situation is different, and we need to really educate them about their options and then let them, decide what they think is best for them. And I find that having conversations with them and their families is the best way to do that. Just, this is what it looks like if you stay here this many years. It's why it takes a lot of time to be a newcomer counselor, because every individual student needs that one-on-one conversation. And like I think it was Robert was saying, you have to look at that transcript every year with them to really help them recognize and see that their case is really specific and individual. I'm going into all the ELD classrooms next week to have a 2-day lesson with them, just apart from everything else that all students get at school, because we need to talk about what sequences look like for them versus other students. And they're going to look at their transcripts and they're going to do an activity because they really need to understand their specific individual situation and be educated about their options so that they, it's their life. So they need to have ownership over what they're doing at school. I'm on my soapbox. If there aren't any other questions, I will hop off. And then Jeanette, I can share this presentation with you so that you can get it to the group. And I'm happy to connect with people individually if you have any other questions.
Thank you, Julie, so much for being so generous with your time. We much appreciate it.
Thanks
And
for
you will, thank you so much, Julie. And we will have access to her PowerPoint. I will forward that in the notes after today, as well as if you look on the agenda, Jonathan had found this document that I have highlighted for you in the agenda as a resource. Also, it came from the Northwest Education Lab in Portland, and it has lots of really good, solid information that you may want to peruse through and see what you think. Has anyone looked at it at all? I sent it yesterday. Any feedback on it? It's very comprehensive. So what will we be taking away from Julie's presentation? I'd like for you to take a second and think about what is it that resonated with you that would make it real for your job? For me, it was the idea that every student is an individual case. They come from so many different places, and that we really need to look at their circumstances and their situations and so on. I remember working at a school that the student was going to turn 21 toward the end of the school year and needed to finish up the school year and finish up the credits so that she could graduate. And she did, and we made it possible because we had to advocate that it was until the end of the school year. The school district did not recognize that, once she turned 21, she had to leave. So it was a matter of educating colleagues at the school that it was until the end of the school year that she turned 21. So anyway, that is our job, is to advocate and to educate others because they just may not know. Okay, I am going to stop the recording at this point.